Hello, my name is Martin Popplewell and welcome to this AeroTime interview, which is part of our special week dedicated to women in aviation. We'll be bringing you special reports and interviews from across the world celebrating the role that women have played in the sector. Today, we'll be hearing from Jacqueline Sutton, who's the Chief Customer Officer of Rolls-Royce. Jacqui graduated from Durham University and also studied at INSEAD on the International Executive Programme. She's also served as a non-executive director on the board of Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site and as a trustee for the Derby Museums and Arts Trust. Last year, Jacqui took over as the co-chair for the Women in Aviation. Hello, Jacqui, and thank you for joining us. So, Jacqui, thank you for joining us. I want to start at the beginning of your career. You actually have a bachelor's degree in German and Russian. How does someone with a bachelor's degree in German and Russian end up managing relationships between Rolls-Royce and its airline customers?
Yes, it's not obvious, is it, how you translate one to the other. I'd actually majored in Russian and had spent part of my student degree living in the Soviet Union in the 1980s. So I was very focused on trying to find a job where I could use my Russian, and happened to see an advertisement in the Birmingham Evening Mail for an export sales professional, and it happened to be with an aerospace manufacturing company making windscreens and cabin windows for aircraft in Birmingham, and they snapped me up. I was delighted to get the job, and that's how I accidentally landed in aerospace.
It is a sector which is well renowned for being stuffed full of men. Did you have any kind of reservations about going into a sector where there might be more sexism and it might have been a problem in terms of the progression of your career?
Well, to be honest, it hadn't really occurred to me at all to think about that. I'm one of four. I've got three brothers. So you could argue that I was already pretty used to being the odd one out, if you want to think of it that way. It had perhaps also made me a slightly competitive person in terms of wanting to and making sure that I held my own in any given situation. And so when I arrived in the business, I think the thing that struck me the most was that I wasn't used to being in an industrial environment, but I just found it fascinating, the factory, how it worked, who the people were. And it took me a while, I think, to really realise that actually I was the odd one out. It was probably in one of many meetings where I felt, at least in the early days, that I was finding it difficult to make my voice heard, and reflecting, that actually I was pretty much the only one in the room that wasn't a man. But initially I thought it was because they already knew each other. And then I realised that, yes, that was part of it, but also it was just that, I was different, and was coming across that way, I think.
Give us some examples of where that actually turned into pretty much out and out sexism.
Well, I think my favourite examples, because we are talking about the early 90s here, so I'm sure that I'm not the only woman listening to this who would have similar examples. I think my favourite are definitely going out, to, here I am, I'm a fully fledged and qualified salesperson being sent out to work with our customers to hopefully make sure that our products are adopted and sold. And for at least, on several occasions, the look of shock, on the face of the man in the customer that I was visiting when I showed up, and would, sometimes look over my shoulder, certainly in some countries, because I, usually spoke their language. I speak a few languages. They would kind of look over my shoulder and say, "Oh, the interpreter's arrived. Where's your boss?" And I'd say, "Well, actually, this is it. This is me." Those are the kinds of examples that I would come up. The second one, as I mentioned, making your voice heard. I think it was probably after about 5 years of of being in this industry, somebody sent me a kind of one of those postcards with a cartoon on it, and the cartoon had, 12 people sat around a boardroom, and 11 of them are men, and there's one woman, and the chairman says, is seen saying, "Yes, that's a very good idea, Miss Scott. Now all we need is for one of the men to propose it." And that really resonated with me when I read that, because on more than one occasion I could think of meetings where I would suggest something, and then, that nobody would really pay much attention to it. Then about 45 minutes later, one of the men would say the same thing and everyone would agree that it was a great idea. I definitely found that in those early years as well.
And how did you respond to those kind of reactions? I mean, what was your your coping mechanism?
Well, I mean, I'm as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I am quite a competitive person who therefore wants to find a way around, to do something better. And I also instinctively, I guess, realised that whatever solution I was going to come up with to solve this challenge needed to still be authentic to me. In other words, it wasn't me to then think, okay, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to be frustrated and bang the table or do something. It was, okay, here's a problem, I want to solve it. How am I going to go about it? And really finding other ways to get my voice heard, often by talking to colleagues outside the meeting before I get into the meeting. I found techniques, I guess, to ways that I could still get my voice heard, but while still being authentic to who I was as a person.
And did you see other women who perhaps dropped out of the sector because they felt that actually it wasn't a battle that they wanted to fight or thought was worth fighting?
From time to time, you do, have some conversations with people who are seriously questioning, whether it's an environment, and they see it as just as you've described it, as a battle that they feel they're finding exhausting and they feel they're not going to win. And I have a lot of sympathy for that, because I do think that it is often a kind of more, I hate to generalize too much, but it can be a more female quality to self-select out of an environment or out of a career path because of the quality of their experience. And when they look at the kind of senior leaders that they would be working with as they progress, they just decide, actually, I'm not sure this is an environment I really want to be in or to be part of. And, speaking about myself in terms of having experienced that, I definitely had a stage in my kind of early to mid 30s where I was seriously considering leaving the industry, leaving the particular business that I was with at the time. But it was to do with looking up at the leadership in the C-suite at the time and just finding it to be a very unattractive and uninspiring environment that I would want to be part of. And it just coincided at the time with very fortunately for me, being given an external mentor who was a FTSE 100 CEO himself and had volunteered for a mentoring program to encourage more women to become senior leaders in FTSE companies, not just in the aviation industry. And I just, I tell him to this day that he is the reason that I stayed in my career and in the sector, because he really opened my eyes to ways that I could make a difference by staying, and also ways that I could make my own life better and help get my voice heard better in an environment where I was in the minority, if you like. So there was some self-help as well as some opportunities to enact change. But as he said, you know, who's going to change it if you leave as well? And that resonated for me.
And how exactly did he get into how did he communicate why you should stay and how you should sort of fight your corner? What was it about the way that he explained things that made it work for you?
Well, firstly, I was very fortunate to find him, because I feel that he's one of the most authentic and high in integrity leaders that I've ever seen or had the privilege to, you know, have a business relationship with. And he did it really by reading me really well about what was important to me, and talking to me my whole self and what I wanted out of my life, not just what I wanted out of my job. And he really helped me kind of unpack, if you like, what was important and how I could find things in my career, even where I already was, that probably I hadn't appreciated would also be important to me, you know, as I built my broader journey through my life, if you like. It sounds very very kind of deep and meaningful, but actually it was really important. He really helped me reflect on what I wanted overall, not just what I wanted from my job.
Nowadays, there's an awful lot of talk about promoting STEM subjects at school for girls at school and women who perhaps go on to further education. But was there much encouragement for that when you were around at school, and have you seen that change a lot over the recent years?
Oh, I think it's changed absolutely, markedly, and in a really important way. I think certainly when I was at school age, the tendency was to let those that were naturally good at a subject do that subject and others do others. And for sure, I don't remember being actively encouraged to appreciate STEM subjects. Indeed, you know, one of my elder brothers is my elder brother's an engineer, and he was the one fascinated with aerospace and aviation, was building airfix planes and studying physics and so on. I think to this day he's more than slightly irritated that I'm the one actually working in the aerospace industry rather than him. But for sure, that I don't remember being actively encouraged. I think now the way that certainly Rolls-Royce, you know, we do a lot of this, and it's fantastic, sending our some of our young apprentices back into schools, you know, so they're closer to the age, it resonates with the school kids so much more, to really help create that excitement and passion around the subjects. I feel certain that had that kind of thing been happening when I was primary, you know, or early secondary, I think that would have caught my imagination as well. Happily, you know, as I described a minute ago, I accidentally arrived here anyway with my Russian, but how better it would have been to also be encouraged in those subjects, you know, when I was school age.
When did you first realise that the sector was undergoing changes in terms of its approach to diversity and inclusion?
I think that this would probably be only, you know, 8 years, maybe. 8 years is probably being a bit generous. 8 years ago. I think that we've really started moving forward, you know, more in the last 4 to 5 years, I would say. And I feel, you know, that the general momentum, certainly the move to throw a spotlight on all FTSE 100 companies and the environment as a whole, not just, you know, the aerospace and aviation sector. I think that has certainly helped to move us forward, you know, in our part of the industry as well as in these others.
You're co-chair of the Women in Aviation and Aerospace Charter. For those people that don't know much or anything indeed about it, can you just give us a thumbnail sketch of what it's about and what it does?
Absolutely, yeah. This was a fantastic initiative that was started off by two women, both forces of nature, I would say, one of whom is still my co-chair to this day, Samati, and the second of whom is Catherine. It all happened at the Farnborough Air Show in 2018, where looking around the room and having conversations with other like-minded people, they just came to a consensus that actually we needed to do more to start making a difference within our industry. I know there was some inspiration that came from the huge strides that the Women in Finance Charter has made, for example, and that just felt like a good blueprint that we could use also in aerospace and aviation to really kind of garner support and connect all of the different companies within the sector that also wanted to get involved and make a difference in the industry, to get us all together so that we could have combined purpose and move forward in that way.
You, I think, have spoken in the past about being a great believer in what you term micro interventions. What do you mean by micro interventions, and what micro interventions have helped your career?
What I mean by those is really, rather than talking, sometimes we can talk in quite broad generalities about what's needed in order to move this topic forward. A micro intervention in my book is really the power of something like mentoring or coaching. So in my experience, it's the one that I've already referenced to you that really kept me in the industry, which was the simplicity but really powerful point of being given a mentor who would help to coach me at that very pivotal part of my career. Why is it micro intervention? Because actually, in some respects, these are quite subtle things that you're coaching people to develop and change. But in reality, can have a really big effect, because I would say that, you know, it's a big effect that ultimately I decided as a result of that intervention to stay in the industry rather than leave, which I could so easily have done.
I think you've just launched a new executive summary of your report into the gender balance, or perhaps gender imbalance of the industry. What are the key messages coming out of that work?
Yeah, this is fantastic work that has been done, led by Corn Ferry, but also in close cooperation with Women's FA, Baroness Sue Campbell, who's absolutely inspirational in terms of what's been achieved in women's football. And I absolutely endorse, you know, and encourage everybody watching this to read at least the exec summary, if not the full report, because there's some really practical and helpful advice in there. The first is, you know your passion. In other words, if you're going to make a difference, particularly as a senior leader in the industry, it needs to come from a place of authentic passion and commitment to wanting this to happen, to making a difference. The second is that not to be a one-hit wonder. In other words, this needs to be a plan that happens over the long term, not just one or two events here and there. And the third really is that you have to believe in it and be alongside the champions that you dot around the industry, or around a business, for example, who you want to empower and give the capability to really move the agenda forward. So there are lots of practical tips in there, and a lot of the advice that resonated with those of us that have lived, you know, a lot of the experiences that are described.
And there's a resource hub as well. How does that work?
Yes, on the Women in Aviation Aerospace Charter website, we've recently launched what we're calling our resource hub. The power of the Charter is that we have more than 220 and growing signatories who are all businesses in our sector that have elected to sign up for the goals that we have as a charter. And what we do in return is to really connect those signatories and harness the power that we have from the knowledge base of each of those signatories, and indeed other pieces of research, other parties, for example, the Hampton-Alexander report, etc. And we put all of that together on what we called our resource hub, where in all of these different steps along a woman's career, there is help, advice, links to research reports, connections to other organisations. It's designed to be practical help. We really wanted to make a resource hub that would give people practical help and advice as they develop their own careers or coach others or want to attract new people into the industry. So it's got a lot of great tips and help.
It sounds like it. I'm not sure if you know, but AeroTime is launching a new behind the scenes news report about the first ever all-female crew flight that took place in Afghanistan a couple of weeks ago. It's an example of a modern day story of women in aviation. What stories of women in an aviation from the past have been the sort of the inspiring ones for you?
Well, the most inspiring one for me, certainly we can, you know, the Amy Johnsons of this world were all absolutely brilliant, but actually the most inspiring female role model for me in the aviation industry is a former customer of mine who's now a friend of mine, a woman called Chris Brown, who most recently was the COO at EasyJet, but before that she was at First Choice. She started life actually as, on the travel agency side at Iberia Airways, and she's an absolute inspiration to me just because in a similar kind of way she came in with a non-STEM background into the industry and just grew and loved it, built from there. She's encouraged so many other women in the businesses that she's worked with in the sector. I find that, you know, her focus, the time that she's put into coaching and encouraging others, as well as doing a spectacular job herself in very high pressure roles. She's the person that I always think of when I'm asked who's inspired me in the industry.
If there's one thing that you could change in the aviation sector and see that change happen within the next 10 years, what would it be for you?
For me, it would be how we tell our story, actually. So in some respects, it's within our own grasp. I think that, you know, there are so many opportunities that are available to people of all different backgrounds and women who have really strong skills that aren't necessarily engineering, but have a lot to offer. That could be great program managers, could be great commercial negotiators, could be great leaders of large teams. And really, we don't advertise enough what all of these different paths are that could be careers for people in attracting them into the industry. So the change I would like to see is really that we work much better to tell our story in terms of all of the different opportunities and exciting roles there are that are open to people. I think that in itself would inspire more people to consider it in the first place.
Excellent answer. Jacqui, I'm going to finish the questions now and bring in AeroTime's Chief Executive, Richard Stevenson. Richard, over to you.
Martin, thank you. And Jacqui, thank you for being here today and for sharing your thoughts with us. I know that I speak for everyone at AeroTime, Rolls-Royce and the wider industry in wanting to acknowledge your contribution to promoting diversity and inclusion across aviation. And with that in mind, it is my very great pleasure to virtually present you with one of the very first AeroTime Aviation Achievement Awards. This award is made by the Global Executive Committee of AeroTime, and I would like to read the citation. Presented to Jacqueline Sutton in recognition of her leadership and energy in promoting diversity and inclusion across the aviation sector, including serving as the co-chair of the Women in Aviation Charter. The AeroTime Global Executive Committee recognises the positive influence of these efforts and the significance of the impact on the aviation industry and its people, both today and into the future. Jacqui, congratulations for being one of the very first recipients of this award, and I'm delighted to tell you that a number of the first recipients of this award are all women, and we will be announcing more of them later this week. I'm so sorry that we cannot meet to hand over this certificate and trophy in person, but it will be winging its way to you in the very near future, and we hope that it will serve as a constant reminder of the gratitude of so many people for your efforts over many years. Thank you.
Well, I feel very humbled and honoured by that. And I stand on the shoulders of many, many women who have done a spectacular job in our industry over many years, as well as a lot of really capable and encouraging men as well, who've been my bosses and encouraged me in the various roles that I've had. So I feel very honoured by that. Thank you very much indeed. This is such an important subject. There are so many great people in our industry, and thank you very much.
Jacqui, thank you for joining AeroTime today. Congratulations too on your AeroTime Aviation Achievement Award. That brings us to the end of this AeroTime interview, but we will be publishing a range of articles and interviews marking this week to recognise and celebrate the contribution and success of women in our sector. Thank you for joining us. My name is Martin Popplewell, and you've been watching AeroTime. Goodbye.